This video is going to be how I got to this point right here, and I'm trying something new. Voice over a picture. Yay! So if you notice in this picture, there are two lines over here that are not really supposed to be there. The oil, got rid of the idiot light, and I put a gauge in it, and with the alternator, I also put a gauge in it that would be a volt gauge instead of an amp gauge, so that way it will actually show like 12 volts. Beyond that, there we go. So I took apart Mr. Volt Gauge, and this is just your standard, volt gauge, and I set it up so that way right in the middle it was exactly 12 and a half volts or so, 12.4, whatever it is, and the next line over it would show 14 so volts, so that way it could be charging while it goes down the road. Really simple deal, and these actually screwed in. If you see the two little holes there, they screwed right in, and on this next picture you'll see there it is, the two little holes right there where the two screws are. That's how it went in. And then I had to figure out how I was going to get this actually into the housing, because this is a pretty simple deal here, and it was really fun to kind of put this in here because, I wanted something to show if it was charging or not. So moving on to the next picture here, and tick-a-tock. There it is. That kind of shows what it looks like when it is in full motion, or actually when it's been bolted to it. And it, like I said, it's a really easy deal. And then I just had to figure out how I was going to cut the hole and still keep like all the functions available. And so moving on to the next picture here in just a second, I kind of, like I said, never done this before, so here we go. Moving on, ding, ding, ding. Took a little hole saw, cut it through there, and this housing was from a 67, and so what I did is I cleaned it all up and I repainted it white, and so that way it would reflect better. But then I cut the hole in there and then just started to kind of fit it and see how it was going to work. And I was actually just going to put the voltmeter gauge in there and just leave it alone. But here it is as far as from the back. That's kind of how I cut it. And I took up some of the slack. I took up some of the slack with electrical tape, and I just kept folding it over and folding it over, so that way it would actually kind of set in where it needed to be. And I was just like, well, hey, I guess this is kind of good enough, and would actually kind of fit it to where it would kind of fit in there. And then so you can kind of see it a little bit. Maybe you can't, but there's electrical tape underneath there, and that's kind of how I set it in there. And then while I was looking at it, on the right hand side there's like a little clip where it needs to set in. On the other side of where the oil light goes, there's a little step right there. So I kind of lined it up with that, and then was thinking, wow, this was kind of easy. I think I can do an oil. So I got another ProComp oil gauge. This is an electrical unit, and it was brand new, and it's kind of cool to buy a gauge and just kind of tear it apart right off the bat, just get the internals out. So then I kind of marked where the actual gauge was itself, and the actual the arm itself, so that way when I put it in there I knew exactly where it would be. And then next thing here, you can kind of see how I did the same thing here, is that it's two screws, because that's how it goes onto the flat, and then I cut the holes, used a couple washers and put it in there, and then drilled a tiny little hole so that way the arm could come through. And then now it was like, how am I going to get this to fit in there? So it was kind of in the same thing. I knew the other side would fit, so then I was moving on to the next side, and then hey, cut another hole. And I think I only show the one picture, but I got to tell you that I cut hole after saw after grind, because if you see on, which would be the volt side, it goes down, but then on the other side it doesn't. So I had to cut that out and keep cutting it out, because that's kind of where it sat. So there was it was much larger there. and so it sucked. So then I was like, oh, I even got to cut more. So it was kind of sitting in there, and then you could see once again I was trying to get that tab in there, and once again, Mr. Electrical Tape to the rescue, and I just started folding it over and folding it over and folding it over until I kind of got it to where it was going to set, so that way it had a a pad to sit on, and it was looking okay. So then I kind of moved on from there and then started putting the rest of it together. Oh, and then I didn't put a light in it. I actually put a little piece of steel behind there and then painted it black. I was going to put an idiot light in there to show that if it was out, it would light up. But yeah, just by the time I got everything in there, it was too crowded. So then I put the rest of this all together and I painted all the arms the exact same. I went down to a modeling store, got those, and then got brand new lights and stuff. And I didn't go with LEDs. I went with like the 194 bulbs. And then that's me kind of putting it back together as I was going through. And there was a lot of, adjustment and fitment in between here. This is when I was back in San Diego. And before the days of getting everything on videotape, I was just taking stills. I was on a little forum called 4A Bodies Only. And I didn't really care about taking videos. I just kind of, took stills just so I could show people kind of what I was doing. So this is pretty close to being done. And then what was really cool is on this next one here is the blue one is the 67, the green one is the 66, and then what I did is you can see where I siliconed it all in, and then I took everything and then soldered it in, and then I used the original cable, so that way the wire that would go in for the idiot light for the oil was actually now the wire for the oil, because it was electronic gauge. All right, moving on to the next picture. This is a close-up of that. You can see that the brown wire is the ground, and what I did is I grounded everything out really good because these things don't lose ground. So that's why there's a brown wire. It goes from the one side to the other side, so that way that doesn't lose ground. The blue wire is going to be the hot wire, so that's going to be the 12 volts, and so that daisy chains. And then the yellow wire is the one that is sending the sending unit, so that way it still goes with the factory plug. So there's no extra plugs, there's no extra wires that you got to remember, and this is why I wanted to do that, so that way it was kind of a bitchin' deal, so that way you can run the factory plug. And it was a little difficult to get it all in there, but it worked just fine. And I took some of the lights out that were in it because it's just the gauge, so this is all factory lighting and whatnot. So yeah, I hope you liked it, and moving on to the next still here, and this is the finished product. This is what you see in the Lizard King right now, and I hope you enjoyed this. All right, moving on. Victory is mine. Huh? What you know about that? Huh? Look at that. Oil pressure, look at that. I got an oil pressure gauge. And the alt gauge shows pitching. And then look, you turn it off, turn it back on. Right there, it's exactly where I want it to be. Boom. See, look at that. Perfect. So that means I know if it's either charging or discharging. Life is good.